And we go from, no planning and an estate shrinkage to implementing some specific strategies with money that you're not spending, you're reallocating, and you're creating an estate surplus. And it's a visual. Once clients can see it, I think they have a better understanding of why we're implementing this strategy.
Welcome to the Future Ready Advisor podcast. I'm your host, Sam Sivarajan, wealth management consultant and behavioral scientist. Join me and my guests, from industry experts to top advisors, as we explore the pain points that financial advisors face, how they can solve them, free up their time, and make their practice future ready. Hi everyone, I'm Sam Sivarajan. Welcome to today's episode of the Future Ready Advisor. Today, I'm here with Bryan Scott, a seasoned financial advisor focused on insurance and planning solutions. Financial advice is not just about investing. It is much more holistic than that. And Bryan is here to talk about how he is incorporating that thinking into his practice. Bryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sam. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure to have you. Let me introduce you to our guests. Bryan is a certified financial planner with over 10 years of experience in the financial services industry. As a CFP professional, Bryan specializes in comprehensive retirement income and tax and estate planning. Bryan works diligently with his clients to help discover both their needs and goals and provides advice and counsel to make them a reality. Again, Bryan, welcome to the show, and let's dive in. Bryan, I'd love for you to share with us a little bit about how your practice has evolved and your practice today.
Yeah, so I started in the industry back in 2012. My father was in the industry for 43 years, retired back in 2019. So following in the family footsteps, I graduated from the Odette School of Business back in 2012 and started with Freedom 55, which was the division of London Life at the time, in 2012. And over the years now, again, you blink and 10 years go by. But when I started, it was, certainly a bit of a wake-up call for me. It was, they always tell you when you first start, it's family and friends, right? Is your natural market. And, certainly with my father in the business, family was off the table. And at the time I was only 25 years old. So trying to sell my 25-year-old buddies on life insurance and critical illness and starting to put some money away, it had some issues there. So I always share this story. In my first year, I sold one policy, and it was a critical illness policy to my sister. And the next year, she lapsed the policy, and I got charged back on it. So I had a very, very difficult first year. But what I did was I tried to take advantage of the fact that I didn't have a large natural market that was necessarily ready for the financial planning world. So I focused more on education. So I started my CHS, completed that, started to work some more towards some of my other designations, my CFP as well as my CLU, and then most recently my CEA and EPC. I'm working on my CIM right now as we speak. But over the last 12 years, my business has evolved dramatically. As many advisors do, starting out in the industry, I was very much a transactional advisor, trying to put a little bit of money in my pocket, mutual funds here, seg funds there, some small life insurance policies here, whether that's term or whole life. And then I was able to, or not able to, I had the luxury or I was fortunate enough to be able to buy a business in the second year. And the book of business was from an older advisor. The demographic was a little bit older. So that kind of put me on that trajectory to working in that retirement market. And fast forward a few years, my father retires in 2019, and I purchased his block of business as well too. And there was no family discount on that one either. But but that's when things really started to evolve in how I operated my practice, where I started to transition again from that transactional type of advisor in and out. Like I said, here is your portfolio, here's some insurance, small life sale, 20 pay, whole life, term, whatever it may be. But I was able to start taking more time with my clients and really start to work on the planning side of the business. And the reason I was able to do that is because I had a good foundation, in terms of clientele. I didn't have to be in and out, make a sale to put money in my pocket, to put food on the table. I had a good foundational residual base, so to speak. So I was able to take my time, and that's where I started to develop those skills in the specific financial planning world. And from there, it really evolved. We used NaviPlan previously. I spent a lot of time learning NaviPlan and taking a lot of those intangibles for clients: CPP, OAS, RIF, income, maybe there's a DB pension, CPP, and really put it into something tangible in the form of a financial plan. And that's where I believe my business really started to take a turn towards holistic financial planning. And, so I started to get into the areas of the business that I really, really enjoyed, which was working with clients. Again, more than just one meeting, sometimes three, four meetings, and gathering the information and slowly starting to create and evolve my process in the financial planning world. So, I've been in the business since 2012, so I'm in my 12th year now, and I follow a very specific process when it comes to financial planning. I've transitioned from that transactional advisor to comprehensive planning, right?
That's awesome. And I know that part of your comprehensive planning, you're passionate about the role of life insurance in people's financial affairs, not just in protecting their families against death or injury, but increasingly as a way for them to manage their affairs in a tax effective way. Can you explain a bit of that approach and that thinking to the listeners?
Yeah, it's funny that you say passionate. I was in a meeting last week with a client. It was a 3 hour and 20 minute meeting. It was a proposal for a financial plan, implementing some recommendations based on their circumstances. And when everything was all said and done, she looked across the table at me, completely straight faced, and said, "I have never seen anyone speak about something as mundane as life insurance with such conviction and passion." And it just made me laugh because it's true. I'm a firm believer in insurance. Term serves its purpose. I have a lot of term on myself. I have a young family, covers a lot of debt for a shorter period of time for the least amount of premium dollar. But what I really find valuable is the use of permanent insurance in a client's financial house. And I refer to permanent insurance as a tax sheltered state enhancement plan. And that's really truly what it comes down to. In most cases, when I sit down with a client for the first time and we start discussing, as I go through my process, so to speak, and I go through my discovery, which I break down into two areas: hard facts, soft facts. Hard facts is what you have, soft facts is what you want to do. One of the first questions I always ask clients is, can you define insurance for me? And most of the time I get a very similar answer along the lines of, well, this is what I pay and this is what someone else gets when I die. And if you break it down to its fundamental definition, they're not wrong. That is correct. However, I like to utilize it in a financial plan more or less as an asset class complementary to their existing portfolio, made up of whatever that may be: DB pensions, RSPs, TFSAs, non-registered accounts, because it does play such a pivotal role in the foundation of any client's financial house. And I'm a true believer that no matter how big or small the the policy is, or the plan is in terms of permanent insurance, there is always a place for it in someone's financial house. And I've really evolved that strategy of using permanent insurance as a tax sheltered estate enhancement plan. And again, every client's different. No two plans are the same. So, one client, we may be looking at trying to tax shelter non-registered assets and avoid the tax grind, which may or may not impede on OAS clawback down the road as well too. Or, if there's a lot of debt, or they just have a lot of wealth and they're not going to spend it, maybe they're fairly frugal, for the lack of better words, using it as an estate enhancement to transfer wealth in the most tax efficient and time efficient way to clients. or to their children, I should say. It's a very, very powerful tool.
That's a great point, I think, and I can see your client recognizing the need for something like that. It is something that isn't discussed, I think, often enough or brought up often enough, I think, by many advisors. I think to your point about permanent insurance playing a role beyond simple protection, but actually being an asset class. What are some examples? You talk about tax deference strategies or the role that it can play in kind of tax efficient estate planning. Can you give some examples of this kind of approach, the planning approach that you've taken in to showcase to a client how permanent insurance actually can add a lot more value than they perhaps might have thought? Then, as you pointed out, that this is the premium that I paid. This is what somebody who gets when I pass on. I think there is more to it than that, and it would be great if you can just walk through some examples of that kind of thinking.
Sure. The I think there is a, I don't want to say negative understanding of life insurance, but maybe a misunderstanding of how life insurance can work in a financial portfolio. And again, when I go through my discovery, I'm fortunate enough to be working in a higher net worth market. And the two areas when I'm building my plan, the first box we always want to check off as we go through our discovery and I start my analysis for the retirement and estate plan is, are we going to have enough money to satisfy your retirement, right? And in most cases, we can check that box off in terms of month to month cash flow. They're not eating ramen noodles and hot dogs, so to speak. If they want to go out or go on vacation, they don't have to call me up and say, hey, is this going to affect my cash flow? Am I going to run out of money? In most cases, we're able to cross that box off. So the next area that I focused on, especially when we get into the soft facts of discussing their financial plan and what their goals may be, it's funny because it's a very morbid conversation, and a lot of clients don't necessarily have an answer for me. So I kind of guide them along a little bit and say, well, what do you want to do? What are you trying to achieve? And in many cases, clients don't really have an answer. So, I've had two ends of the spectrum. I've had some clients say, I want to die rubbing my last two dimes together. Okay, we can design your plan that way. I want to the other end of the spectrum, which is I want to leave all my money to charity. That may be close to heart. But where most of the clients lie is, and again, through discussion and getting them to this point, is I want to be able to enjoy my retirement and spend my money as I see fit. Again, not have to worry so much about cash flow. And again, when I say that, not going out and buying 3 or 4 Ferraris, but again, being mindful of their cash flow on a month to month basis. But where most clients land in the soft facts of what they want to do is, again, enjoy retirement, do what they want to do with their wealth. But most importantly, the residual estate, and in 99% of the cases that I work on, there is a residual estate. The goal is to maximize wealth transfer and minimize taxation at death. So again, I try to get clients to have a bit of a different perspective on permanent insurance. And when you use it as an asset class, complementary to your traditional investment vehicles, as I said earlier, RSPs, tax-free savings accounts, non-registered accounts, it can be very, very powerful. And there's a couple of reasons why. I mean, we touched on it a little bit earlier. We know that the cash value of the life insurance policy grows without taxation, and it also grows without traditional market volatility, right? If the markets are down 20%, the cash value is not affected. If the markets are up 20%, the cash value is not affected. So it's a very risk averse way or very safe way to build your wealth in a tax free or tax deferred environment. In addition to that, in many cases, clients like the idea to know that they have the ability to access the cash value. They don't want to see it as a sunken cost, going back to that traditional or fundamental definition of insurance as this is what I pay and this is what I get, or someone else gets when I pass away. When in reality, all we're doing is reallocating your existing assets into a new asset class in the form of permanent insurance. And in my opinion, permanent insurance is the asset class that just no one talks about. And when you can see how powerful it is in combination with your traditional financial planning of your traditional investment vehicles, it does create such a substantial increase in many areas: tax efficiency, estate enhancement. We talk to clients about, we have the ability to collateralize the policy, be able to access that cash value tax free via a secured line of credit through the bank. The bank becomes primary beneficiary for whatever is borrowed plus accrued interest, and the remainder still goes to your family tax free outside of your estate. So you're able to access that wealth without any taxation. Yes, interest is accruing. However, the idea being is you're never going to pay it back, because we know the death benefit is going to be able to cover what's borrowed plus what's accrued, and then the remainder of that death benefit will still go to your family tax free. And what I do specifically is I use very specific terminology. Unless I'm talking about term, I never use the word premium. I always use the word deposit. I use words like reallocation of assets, insurance as an asset class. I have the programming that I use is Conquest. We recently changed from Naviplan, but they have a very, very good way of illustrating permanent insurance as an asset class, because when you go and look at your overall net worth, I put your current plan beside your recommended plan, and your current plan will have your lifestyle assets, which is the value of your home. Maybe you have a secondary property or tertiary property, your registered assets, your tax-free accounts, your non-registered accounts, any liabilities, and then your total net worth. And then right beside it, we have your recommended plan. And the only difference between the two is now we have a new column that says life insurance, and that is the cash value of the contract. So really, it's really easy to illustrate. And again, I try to keep things as simple as possible for clients. And I say, this is what I'm referring to when I say reallocation of assets. We are moving money from account A, whether that be a non-registered account or a registered account, depending on the strategy we're trying to achieve. And maybe it's a RIF meltdown if you have too much registered assets and there's a tax liability at death, or maybe you have a lot of non-registered assets that are hurting you on the tax grind, right? Because all growth is taxable in non-registered assets. So basically, what I say is we're reallocating your assets from one bucket to another. And the analogy that I use that I think most clients can really understand is, if your left pocket is taxable and your right pocket is non-taxable, we're taking money from your left pocket and putting it in your right pocket. And that's really my definition of permanent insurance. And you're getting the best of both worlds. Down the road, if you ever want to access that cash value, it's there for you. But in many cases, clients typically won't access it because they already have a lot of registered assets. They may have a pension, they have their tax-free account for liquidity. So really, you go to the next slide that I typically show clients, and we say, well, maybe your net estate is $3 million after all your assets minus liabilities. But then there's also this little piece at the bottom called estate shrinkage or estate percentage. And what that is the amount of your estate that you're giving back in the form of taxation. And in many cases, it's always in the negative because there is a tax liability if proper planning hasn't been completed. So my goal is to show clients, well, again, twofold. We're creating a unique asset class, or we're implementing a new asset class that operates a little bit differently than your traditional investment vehicles or your other asset classes in the sense that it grows without taxation and is independent of market volatility. But in the event that you never spend any of this money, there's this large tax-free death benefit that's going to be paid out to your named beneficiaries within 7 to 10 business days upon signature of the beneficiaries. And then I'd like to show again, side by side, your multi-year estate. If we do nothing, this is exactly what's going to happen. And typically there is a large tax bill and sometimes a significant estate shrinkage. And then if we implement this strategy, here is the the positive effect on your overall net estate. And in many cases, I structure the policies to create an estate surplus. So we are essentially eliminating the tax liability or minimizing the tax liability and maximizing wealth transfer. And we go from no planning and an estate shrinkage to implementing some specific strategies with money that you're not spending, you're reallocating, and you're creating an estate surplus. And I think it's just it's a visual. Once clients can see it, I think they have a better understanding of why we're implementing this strategy.
I think that's a great point, Brian. And I think it's a great way of characterizing moving it from the left pocket to the right pocket. I think that's a powerful visual. And I think you're right. I think many clients don't see the flexibility that permanent insurance can provide, and the fact that it can be treated as an asset class. I've often thought that the flexibility that permanent insurance can provide, like the built up equity in your principal residence, I think these are three pillars, or if you will, of the net worth that an individual has, and from which to kind of fund retirement lifestyle expenditures. And the flexibility is such that, again, as you say, you can get a secured line of credit against the cash value of your permanent insurance. But in times of market volatility, if your portfolio is down 10 or 15% and you need to take money to fund your lifestyle, flexibility of being able to borrow against your cash value of your permanent insurance or against your equity in your principal residence is something to be considered along with your financial advisor, because it might be more financially sound to borrow the money, pay the interest, and not draw down your investment portfolio and wait for it to recover so that you back to pre-market drop conditions, and then you can pay back the interest on the loan. But I think it's an interesting point that you're illustrating to clients the flexibility of having permanent, well thought out permanent insurance as part of their portfolio, and how the planning process can help illustrate the different scenarios and the benefits that might accrue to the client.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for touching on that, Sam. The idea that the cash value of a life insurance policy is more or less, call it, independent of market volatility. You make a great point. The fact that, again, if we have a 2022 and markets are down 25% and a client needs 25 grand to fix their roof, buy a new car, their car is broke, whatever it may be, they have that ability to either borrow against the policy, they can surrender paid up additions if that is the dividend option of the plan itself, and with the ability to put the money back into the plan when markets have recovered, because obviously we don't want to be depleting an account that's already been depleted because of market conditions, right? And again, I think the visualization piece is so important. That's why the planning process is such an integral part of anyone's financial plan, again, because what clients need is something visual. And I go back to what I said earlier about those intangibles, right? Where they have CPP, they have OAS, they may have a DB pension, they may have additional properties, they have all of these different, call it, asset classes or accounts. But what does it look like together, right? And that's what's the big picture, what's the end game. And that's where the financial planning process is so powerful, because you're able to show a client, at the end of the day, what we are doing as advisors, and my role as a certified financial planner is to give my clients sound, unbiased guidance and counsel, and more importantly, peace of mind. Because the number one question I typically get when we sit down before we start the process is, am I going to have enough money in retirement? Because you just don't know, right? It's people are living longer these days. If you retire at, call it, 60 or 65 and you live to 90, that's still a third of your life, right? And a staggering statistic that I always share with clients is 52% of Canadians live on CPP and OAS alone. So to have the luxury to be able to implement some of these strategies, not just to tax shelter your wealth or enhance your estate. You're creating generational wealth with money you may or may not spend, and we can go dive deeper into the cascading concept, putting insurance on the children as well too for their grandchildren. And it's it's a very, very powerful product. It just has to be understood, and I think that is the biggest issue or biggest barrier with permanent insurance, is that education factor. And again, as I said, my role is to educate my clients as we go through the planning process and educate them on the benefits of permanent insurance. And it's not just an expense and not just what you pay.
That's great. So, how do advisors listening to this podcast, how do they leverage this kind of thinking, this kind of approach of using permanent insurance as part of the planning process, positioning it as an asset class in and of its own right? How do they do that in their own practice?
Well, I think everyone's going to have their own process. I learned from my two business partners. They took their time when I joined this firm 7 years ago, and they so freely gave me their time and mentored me on how to build a financial plan. And really, what I've done is take some of their best practices, implemented some of my own best practices, and it's constantly evolving. Right? Even a proposal that I'm presenting tomorrow looks slightly different than a proposal that I presented yesterday, or sorry, last week. I'm constantly evolving and trying to enhance the experience for the client. I've actually been doing quite a bit of consulting with other advisors as well too, and in many cases, it's a learning curve with any financial planning software. And I'm a creature of habit. So when we switched to Conquest from NaviPlan, I was dead against it because I knew NaviPlan inside and out. That was my platform. And when I finally made the switch to Conquest, it was the best decision I could have ever made. It's such a intuitive software. It's very user friendly. It's great for clients to understand their financial plan. The problem being is the learning curve, right? I spent numerous hours with our call it Conquest specialist. I always joked with him every time he saw me pop into his calendar. He's like, "Oh, Bryan's here again," right? I spent probably 50, 60 hours with him learning the software, but it is a learning curve. But for other advisors to implement the strategy into their own practice, they have to develop the process, right? And it's not necessarily just using the software, because anyone can input data into software and present it to a client, right? I think it's the language you use. I think it's the delivery. And again, going back to the education factor, clients are not going to implement what they don't understand, right? And I think that's such an important factor when presenting a financial plan. And what I've been doing over the last 6 months is utilizing my specific skill set in financial planning with other advisors and doing joint field work. Right, I was fortunate enough to be asked to speak at our Canada Life kickoff meeting this year in January, and the subject was financial planning using Conquest. And it was myself and another advisor, and we just shared some of the successes we've had using the software. But like I said, I think it takes time to develop that process. And what I've been doing, like I said, is a lot of joint field work where I get a call from an advisor that knows I'm very into the planning side of things, and says, "Hey, I have this client, John Smith. Would you be able to help me on this case?" And absolutely, it's a part of the role that I've taken on as an advisor, not just in my practice, but consulting with other advisors as essentially a third party tax and estate specialist, or whatever they introduce me as to their client. And I run through my process with their client. They keep the client after, of course, we sign a letter of engagement or terms of engagement, just stating that John Smith is your primary advisor. He's asked me to come in to complete the financial plan for you, go through my process. And it gives advisors an opportunity to see how I operate, how I work. the language that I use, how I present concepts so that they can understand. And in many cases, I have some clients or some advisors that say, you know what, I'm just going to use you indefinitely for any of my high net worth clients. But a lot of younger advisors like myself that have a long career ahead of them, they may only need to utilize me on one or two cases. And once they kind of start to understand the process and the delivery and again, the language that I use, they can mimic it, right? And again, I like to give that knowledge and process just as freely as my business partners gave it to me when I started with Corporate Solutions 7 years ago.
That's a very interesting and collaborative approach, Bryan. Congratulations on the success to date. We're coming to the end of our podcast. So I have a few
Thank
final
you.
questions for you. Three rapid fire questions that I ask all my
Thank
guests.
you.
So let me dive into the first one. So, what is the most important lesson you've learned over the years?
Progress, not perfection. And when I say that, I mean, again, going back just what I said previously, my plan proposal for tomorrow is different than the one I presented last week. I'm constantly trying to evolve myself, constantly trying to improve my practices, improve my presentation, improve my proposals, improve my process. And nothing's ever going to be perfect, right? It's a you strive for perfection, but progress is really what I strive for, because again, you're never going to be perfect in one way or the other.
That's great. That's one of my favorite lessons as well. So, next, finish this sentence. I wish I had known.
Oh boy, how much time do we have? I wish I would have known to practice more patience. And what I say when I say that, I mean, when I first started in the industry, it was almost a weekly rant with my director where I would go in and I would be so frustrated because this business is very difficult to break into, especially at a young age when, again, my father being in the business, family was off the table, my friends were still quite young, not interested in the financial planning areas yet. But where I may have fallen short or I tried to bite off more than I could chew at the start, right? I wanted everything yesterday, so to speak. So if I could go back 12 years ago to 25-year-old Bryan and just say, follow your process, be patient, the results will come. That's what I would have told myself.
Look, I think that's great advice. I think it's something that all of us could have probably used as our younger selves. I think it's only time and experience that teaches you that, as you say, that things take time. As you develop your skills, your experience, things fall into place, and it doesn't seem that way when you're starting out, but it rapidly kind of builds up, and you're looking back and being able to do things in a fraction of the time that it might have taken you when you first started out. So it's great. That's great advice. Finally, what do you think is the biggest pain point for most advisors, and what advice would you give them?
I think the biggest pain point for advisors would be just getting started and getting their feet underneath them. Like I said, this business is very, very difficult when you start out, right? And it's one of the types of businesses where you have to have resilience, you have to have perseverance, because the first couple of years it is very difficult. I was fortunate enough to be able to purchase a block of business with Gate, which gave me a foundation of clients. But starting in this business today, it's natural market, and the advice I would give, just like I would give myself, is patience. So things like if you're not actively looking for prospects or knocking on doors for possible group leads, work on your education, work on other areas of the business that will benefit you in the long term, that may not necessarily be putting in your pocket or money in your pocket, so to speak, right at the moment, but you're doing things that are going to benefit yourself and your practice moving forward. I'm a huge advocate for education. I think it is so important in this industry, especially with the landscape of this industry changing. the importance of education. And again, that's what I did. I didn't have too many people to talk to when I started, so I started working on my professional designations. And I think that's probably the biggest, call it the biggest barrier for new advisors is, how do I get started? Where do I find my clients? And again, it's that patience piece.
That's good advice, especially starting out. I think obviously every advisor has to work in the business. I think they need to make sure that they spend the time or carve out the time to work on the business or on themselves, because it's going to pay dividends in the coming years. Bryan, this has been fun
Thanks for
and
having me, Sam. I
lots
really
of good
appreciate it.
stuff to take away. So thank you. If listeners want to learn more about you or
Well,
find out about your
it's funny you
work,
say that. So
where do they
I'm right
go?
in the middle of a transition right now. After 7 great years at my current firm, I've actually accepted a new position. I was asked to join another firm and head of their high net worth financial planning division. So they're launching. It's called Goals Based Advisory and Consulting. My email is Bryan Bryan at gbfplanning.ca. Anyone who wants to reach out to me, I'm more than happy to speak with you. But yeah, it's a bit of a transition for me, and we're in that transition process right now. But I'm excited for what the future holds for me, and running the, call it the high net worth division of this firm, is going to allow me to do exactly what I want to do, which is working with existing clients and the consulting piece as well too with other advisors. So if they want to get a hold of me, I'm on LinkedIn as well too, Bryan Scott on LinkedIn, and then of course my email, just one more time, is Bryan Bryan at gbfplanning.ca, and I'd be more than happy to speak with any advisors that reach out. I think mentorship and sharing personal experiences and any guidance and counsel to new advisors is so important, because like I said, it was so freely given to me from both my two business partners right now, as well as some of the veteran advisors in the Pickering Financial Center when I first started. So yeah, by all means, reach out. I'm more than happy to help where I can.
Well, that's awesome. And congratulations on the next step in your career, Bryan. And thank you again for joining us on this episode of the Future Ready Advisor. In this episode, Bryan Scott discusses the role of life insurance in financial planning, particularly in a tax-effective manner. Here are 3 key takeaways. Number 1, permanent insurance as a tax shelter. Bryan emphasizes the value of permanent insurance as a tax shelter and estate enhancement plan. He believes that permanent insurance can serve as an asset class complementary to traditional investment vehicles. It grows without taxation and market volatility, making it a powerful tool in financial planning. My view is that good wealth management has 4 pillars: investing, insurance, debt management, and estate planning. Permanent insurance touches all 4 pillars and thus plays a critical role. Number 2, customized strategies. Bryan highlights the importance of tailoring insurance strategies for individual clients. He discusses how strategies can vary based on factors like tax sheltering, non-registered assets, debt management, or wealth transfer. The goal is to maximize wealth transfer and minimize taxation at death. I agree that insurance can range from simple protection for your loved ones to complex tax planning. It really depends on the client's needs. A good advisor can help a client implement the right solutions. Number 3, education and visualization. Bryan emphasizes the need for educating clients about the benefits of permanent insurance. He uses visualization to help clients understand how permanent insurance can positively impact their financial plans. The goal is to give clients peace of mind regarding their retirement and estate planning. What Bryan is talking about here is providing clients with the right data and the right scenarios to help them better understand the pros and cons of any particular strategy. Advisors interested in implementing similar strategies should focus on developing a clear process, using language that clients can understand, and consider joint field work or mentorship to learn and adapt these approaches effectively. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Future Ready Advisor. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast. And if you could rate it while you're at it, I would appreciate it. Visit samsivarajan.com where you can download a behavioral coaching guide and find other resources. Join me in the next episode for more tips and tools to make your practice future ready.